Okay, we're back, and today I want to do something a little different. Today we're going to discuss a few things, and then we'll just get on to whatever stuff. But I have one important topic that I mainly want to start this off with, and I can just go into deeper with it as we go on. But for now, all I'm gonna do is start with that, and we'll move on from there. So basically, I've recently come to the conclusion that, well, it's hard. It's just I do not think that just the females exist. I recently have just come to that conclusion. I just don't think they do. Uh, I basically came to this result, this conclusion after um supposedly encountering one, but I still just don't think that was correct. So about that, I just like I'm I'm astounded that it took me this long to get to this realization because, well, it will change many things in science because of it. Now, how I got to this revelation was through this. I had an encounter, but just something seemed off. I don't know. And then I did some research, and I just found no evidence that they ever were real. I am honestly confused as to how the human race reproduces after that, but that's for another day, another video. And speaking of reproduction, the amount that the population has boomed because of it, without there being females, is just incredible. So I don't know what really to say in that regard, because it's gone up. We're almost at 8 billion people. I can check. Let's take a look. We'll take a look right here. Well, there's our answer, because this is just garbage. So 7.8 billion people, and that's without females. Now, the thing is, the big population boom. It was rising steadily throughout history with its occasional drops. The Black Plague was one of those drops. The drops were very substantial in life, and they've caused a lot of whatever. The Black Plague was very detrimental to human development in society, as it was a disease developed by, I believe, the infection spreading through rats. I will go ahead and look that up right here as I'm going throughout this. Black Plague, or Black Death, as it's sometimes referred to, um, basically, like I've been saying, was a virus. It was normally, I believe, it was found out that it was caused by fleas in rats and killed basically half the population of, I think, the world at the time, which I think was around like 500 million people. I'm not 100% sure. Give me one moment. And after that, things things were started to go on a slight increase. It was not good for the people during that time period, as you can see. It was basically a 4 year time period, probably more than that, of this disease just destroying all of society. Now, let me get back onto the topic of whatever. The topic of human population growth. Now, it really started to really kick off, and I'd say around 17 to 1800 is when it started to begin, as it was starting to increase. You know, the uh, the Revolutionary War was happening, people were expanding, there was the age of colonization and everything like that. But new discoveries were being made, like the inventions of guns and gunpowder and all the sorts. I know gunpowder is much older and stuff like that, but still it was used in the use of guns and so forth. But once the technology began to boom in the 1800s during the Industrial Revolution, things really started to change. Change for the better, actually. And those changes really let society grow to the way it is now. But as I was saying, the Industrial Revolution led a lot of uh, great things to happen. One of those things being medicine and the Industrial Revolution, which also brought forth new medicines, started to increase the life expectancy of people. Now I'll go here, life expectancy. I don't know if I'm spelling this right because I'm not looking. Of people throughout history. All right, has just absolutely skyrocketed in 17th century. Like I was saying, it was only around 35 years, and it just started to boom. Let's take a look at it. It's just completely gone up since 1900, up to 70 years from 35. Now, old age in the 1800s, 30 and 40. Every when you hit about middle age now in your 30s and 40s, you that's when people have normally like kind of peaked out or starting to calm down now. For them, that was basically if you got over one of those ages, you were seen as really old or really wise or of likely of the sort. So medicine really brought about that change. And it also brought forth the invention of oil. And oil was very crucial to the most in almost all things that were used for transportation today, along with other things. Oil, crude oil, was originally hard to develop until I believe it was John D. Rockefeller who perfected the process. Now, the process of crude oil is a complex one, and I can't get into that right now, but that's it's for another time maybe, or check out someone else for that. But for now, I'll get keep on referring and whatever. But yes, John D. Rockefeller basically began to get a monopoly over the entire oil industry. The oil industry basically became a booming one. The oil industry also led to the invention of basically motor vehicles, cars, trains. Well, trains were basically using coal at the time, so not really the invention of trains, but like the further development and improvement of trains throughout the era, and also eventually more sophisticated planes and other motor vehicles and motorized boats. But without them, we wouldn't have those more the perfected process. We would not have the transportation like we have today in this world, along with the medicine, life expectancy, and everything I've covered thus far. Now, moving on from there, um, it's the invention of the car, which was pioneered through the oil and many other things before that, like the rubber and wheel and other substances that were originally used on bikes, and that as bikes were also perfected. Speaking of bikes, we'll get into that later when I get onto the topic of planes, but for now, we're going to get onto the topic of cars. Now, the Ford motor industry, one of the biggest like at industries currently, um, but honestly, the biggest in America. It was probably in the United States. It was probably, I would say, one of the just pioneers of today's modern industries because it basically not it did not create the assembly line. It actually, if I'm not correct, like not mistaken, I mean, that they actually found the idea when one of their workers went out to a butcher and saw how the animals were being sent down, sort of like the same concept of an assembly line, and stripped down and um, had their meat processed in certain ways to where each person was doing a very specific job and it got done much quicker. It was then just pioneered and perfected through the Ford motor industry, which allowed for the mass production of cars and pioneered the production line for today's assembling of different items. Now, moving on from that, which basically the assembly line is used in just everyday life now. It's used in everyday life in just from restaurants to still cars and other vehicles to production of certain homes and other things depending on the size of the home. But yeah, without that, we would not have cars that are quite the same as the ones presented, I guess, here. But moving on after that. So the assembly line really gave way for a lot of things. Now, moving on to the 1900s, we're starting to get into the era where things are picking up. Things are picking up there. In the 1900s, things Well, basically, We'll start off with the invention of the airplane with the Wright brothers. The Wright brothers, like I said in a previous little excerpt, was not an excerpt, but one of my previous little whatevers, were the creators of the airplane. Well, the first one, like working. There were a few prototype ideas beforehand, used by many others, but they normally involved really big flappy wings and human power, which just was not possible at the time. And the Wright brothers basically uh, led the thing. They created their first plane, and I believe the first flight happened in 1906 on Kitty Hawk. If I'm not mistaken, I'm gonna go ahead and look it up right here. Wright brothers, two American aviation pioneers. Like I said, world's first airplane. Um, I don't want to go into looking. Oh yeah, 1903. That's what it was. Like Wright Flyer on Kitty Hawk. Like I said, North Carolina. All right. They basically were the ones pioneer of the airplane, and the airplane today is one of like the largest and probably the most safest forms of travel. Despite like all the accidents, like if you really compare to all the other types of accidents that have happened in comparison to other vehicles, planes are really the safest. It's just they have a bad rep because the amount of lives that are lost in a plane crash is normally, uh, I shouldn't say normally, it basically is higher than one that will happen in a typical normal car crash. So, in that regard, yes, you can argue what your opinion on it of which one is safer, but the plane was also is now being just used in the assembly line because certain airplanes, normally in the smaller variety, I'm sure there are in the larger variety, are basically put on a sort of assembly line that was pioneered through Ford Motors, that was basically needed to progress life and living. So, using that knowledge, I'm going to go ahead and move on from the plane into the section of uh just things that getting into the 19, I would say we'll get into the World War One area where it's just started with, I believe it was the Austrian king. We'll look it up here. World War One. Does it say? I'm trying to see if it says the reason why it started. I have a general idea, but I can't remember exactly why. But basically, it got a lot of the world's nations, basically all these here, plus 35 more. Don't want to click on it, but everyone has a general understanding of who was involved and why they were involved, and it just caused a lot of problems throughout the world. Those problems, and I believe still be seen today, but if I'm not mistaken, it was World War One or World War Two that was probably like the most documented, not the most documented, but like the war where news started to get out of what was happening on the battlefield. World War One was also a very intense trench war, so that was also a thing there. But major events during that, besides World War One, was also a few ship sinkings by certain, I believe it was German boats that just caused a lot of still sore relations. But the World War One led to the Treaty of Versailles, which honestly that didn't help. It actually probably was one of the main leading causes of World War Two, which World War Two had and Star Wars are kind of connected in a sense. Star Wars is kind of based off the World War Two era, 1940s, 1930s, that kind of era, because basically the Imperials and everything that the Emperor, they all represent that, and the rebels and everything. They're basically supposed to be the Allied powers, and the Empire slowly gains power through whatever. But we'll get more on that in just a moment. And but yeah, speaking of Star Wars, Um, the prequels weren't too great in the regard. I would say the first original three, they were the best ones. Obviously, my personal favorite, I don't know, I would have to go with Return of the Jedi or Emperor Strikes Back. I'm kind of on the fence for both of them. Both pretty good. New Hope's great, but I just like those ones a little more. The prequels, I would say the third one of the prequels trilogy was probably the best in that regard. But like I was saying, For whatever reason, women are depicted as real in those ones, which I don't understand why, because I haven't found logical evidence as to why they are real in this world, or if why they would do that when if I'm still on the fence. Well, I've sort of made up my mind that they're real. I mean, not real. So hopefully I'll get back to that later in just a few moments. But yeah, back to where I was. The, I don't even understand why they would allow the how the civil rights happened movement, like the woman, like the suffrage movement, and everything, when there was no woman to begin with. That's like where I'm at a loss here, because I'm kind of whatever. But like I said earlier, through all the technologies that were pioneered and everything, it brought forth the internet, which I believe began to rise. Well, it had its early stages in just government technology, radar, and all that, but it eventually developed, I believe, in the 80s or 90s, in the convention of the computer, which eventually got us to where we are today with YouTube, which you can see. Please like and subscribe and support the channel as everyone should. This Yeah, that's basically all I have to say for that. But YouTube has become a interesting place recently with a lot of policy changes and with COPPA. And if you are 13 or younger, please stop watching this. Actually, please stop and just yeah, my channel is completely PG-13 and above. If you're below that age, I would appreciate if you left right now because I don't want to deal with anything involving other people. But moving away from that topic of people on my channel, it has led to a lot of just whatever, and in like recent years, political things have just been going on. A lot of just absolute nonsense. The media is just not great anymore. No one trusts anyone. The democratic policies are just not great at the moment. But that's not what I'm here to discuss because the 2016 race didn't make too much sense if there wasn't a woman because women don't exist still. I'm still whatever on that one, but yeah. If I do one day find that they exist, I'll probably edit this video or delete it and recreate it through another version. But for now, I will leave it up. But moving on from there, don't have too much time left. I don't want to go on for too long. Um, we're going to get on to the final topic of the hour, or I guess I should say of this little thing here is one moment. I'm just confused as to how certain things happen because it says women were involved with them, but I still haven't found no way that they've existed. So I'm still on the fence with that regard. But yeah, once if I get more evidence to disprove or prove my theory, I'll make an update on that. But yeah, for right now, I don't have too much to say about that. I've made my point. I've gone on my little whatever. Now it's just I'm going to give the little shout outs now that I've gone through everything, and I would like to shout out a new person today. I cannot remember who I shouted out last time. I believe it was either Mr. Duck or Mr. T. Berg. It might have been both, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm going to this time shout out a different person. I'm going to shout out two people actually. This one, the first person is a Mr. The White Man. His profile picture kind of contradicts on certain devices that contradicts that statement, but that's fine. It, it's a little odd, but it's still fine. And the second person I'm going to uh shout out today would be Mr. R. Yan, or Looney Squid 89, as some people may know him. Check him out on Xbox if you haven't already. And if you haven't also checked out the other people who I've suggested, if I've left their gamer tags or social medias, please do so for them. Um, that is, I don't have any that I can currently reveal at the moment, but if I do get one, I will definitely share that in the future with people. But that's really the end of this. Um, so I hope everyone enjoyed. This was my discussions topic. I could do another one of these on a different topic eventually, but I had to get this out of the way, out of my system, and just I had to get this going. I had to let people understand this, and I couldn't just let people know. So, well, I had to let people know. So, that's the end of this video. I hope everybody enjoyed, and please like and subscribe, like I already said. Comment down on your opinions, and that's all for me right now. I hope you enjoyed my little filibuster. If you don't know what that means, that's fine because I just did it.